Hello, today is the second lesson in Excel VBA in a nutshell course, getting to know your environment. Before we get started writing any serious code, you need to learn your way around the development environment. In this lesson, we will examine the various aspects and features of Visual Basic Editor VBE. The VBE includes many features that do an excellent job for easing beginners into programming and helping experienced developers to become more productive. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to unhide the developer tab, create, test, and examine the macro, save workbooks that contain macro, understand macro security, and more about your first macro. Unhide the developer tab. The developer tab in Excel is normally hidden, but it's easy to unhide. Let us start getting to know how to unhide the developer tab using the following steps. Right-click any part of the ribbon and choose Customize the ribbon. Make sure that you select Customize ribbon from here. Locate the developer in the second column and put a check mark next to it. Click OK. Now we back to Excel with a new tab that contains Visual Basic, Macro, Record Macro, Use Relative References, and Macro Security. Now let us create an easy and simple macro which will do the following. To type your name into a cell, in the cell below, to enter the current date and time, then format both cells to bold font, size 16 point. The macro does all these steps in a single action. Let us start recording the actions as you go through these steps. Then test the macro to see whether it works properly. Finally, to edit the macro and to add some final and finishing touches. Now we are in a new worksheet and I'm going to explain you step by step how to create your first macro by clicking the developer tab. Before recording macro, make sure that this button is on, use relative references, and that will be explained later. Record macro. That dialog box will appear, record macro dialog box with macro name. Excel provides names for macros like macro 1, 2, and 3, but it is always better to give a more descriptive name. So we'll give a name, and macro, name and time. Shortcut key, it is optional. We will click or we'll type Shift N. So the shortcut key for executing this macro will be Control Shift N. Make sure that the store macro in this workbook. Description is optional, but it is always recommended to write any description. We'll write this is my first macro, smiley face, then clicking OK. As you notice, Excel now in the recording mode and will start recording your actions for the macro. So we'll select any cell will do, and start typing. I'll type my name, Muhammad, enter. In the cell below, I will type equal now, very simple function for the current date and time, enter. This is the current date and time. We will click Ctrl C for copy. In the same cell, paste the special values. Select two cells and format to 16 point, font 16 points, and bold. Now go back to developer tab and stop recording. Stop recording. Okay. Let us test the macro we have just created by clicking the shortcut key, which is Ctrl Shift N, to select any cell. It could be in another new worksheet. Okay. And Ctrl Shift N, my name and the current date and time. Once more, this time we'll use macro from here, macros. Select the macro name. Right now we have only one macro, name and time. Run. Okay, once more. Actually, it is the same, 722. Once more. We'll select another cell, Control Shift M. Now we notice that there is 1 minute difference between 722 and 723. So we make sure that the macro is typing the current date and time. We have recorded a macro and we have tested it. You may wonder what this macro looks like and where it is stored. Remember, when creating a macro, we indicated that Excel should store this macro in this workbook, but we need to activate the Visual Basic Editor VBE to see it. Let us activate the VBE by clicking the Visual Basic button on the Developer tab from here. There is also a shortcut key, Alt F11, so click the Visual Basic button. The VBE program window appears. This window is highly customizable, so your VBE window may look like a bit different. The VBE window contains several other windows. See the Project Explorer window, also known as Project window, contains a list of all workbooks and add-ins that are currently open. Each project is arranged in a tree and can be expanded to show more information or contracted to show less information. The VBE uses other window, any of which can be opened or closed. If a window is not visible, you can choose an option from the View menu to display it. Now we will see where the macro name and time is stored. Check the macro code and make small modifications. So click our file name, book2, module 1, double click. Here you can see the VBA code. The VBA code is in that module is displayed in a code window. The code that's recorded depends on the specific actions we have made while recording the macro. The name and time macro consists of several statements. Excel executes the statements one by one from top to bottom. A statement that is preceded by apostrophe like this. It is a comment. You notice also it is in green color. Comments are included only for your information, and that will be ignored by Excel. The first VBA statement here, which began with the word sub, identifies a macro as sub-procedure and gives it a name. We provided this name before starting recording the macro. If we read through the code here, you may be familiar with size, font name, and function now, also my name. We'll do now small changes. So instead of my first name, I'll type my last name, and instead of 16, I'll make it 26. Okay, back to Excel and see the changes to the macro. We'll select any cell, press Ctrl Shift N to execute the macro. See here, this is my last name instead of my first name, and the font size, previously it was 16, now it is 26. If you store one or more macros in a workbook, the file must be saved as macro-enabled file type. In other words, the file must be saved with XLSM extension rather than the normal Excel extension. For example, when you save the workbook that contains your name and time macro, the file format in the Save As dialog box default to XLSX, a format that cannot contain macros. Unless you change the file format to XLSM, Excel displays a warning. You need to click No and then choose Excel macro enabled workbook from the Save As drop-down list. We will save our file now by click Ctrl S, give it a name, and time, save, yes. As you see here, Excel is giving a warning that if you save your file in that extension, macro will lost. So click No, choose Excel macro enabled workbook, save. Macro security is a key feature in Excel. The reason is that VBA is a powerful language, so powerful that it's possible to create a macro that can do serious damage to your computer. A macro can delete files, send information to other computers, and even destroy Windows, so that you cannot even start your system. The macro security features were created to help prevent these types of problems. In order to change the macro security settings, go to Developer tab, click the macro security. We have in the macro settings, we have 4 options. By default, this option is on disable all macros without notification. With this setting in effect, if you open a workbook that contains macros and the file is not digitally signed or stored in a trusted location, Excel will display a warning. If you are certain that this workbook comes from a trusted source, click Enable Macros and the macro or the macros will be enabled. Click here and OK. By the time you finish this course, you will completely understand how the name and time macro works, and also you will be able to develop more sophisticated macros. For now, let us consider a few additional points about the macro. For this macro to work, its workbook must be open. If you close the workbook, the macro doesn't work. And the shortcut key we have assigned, Ctrl-Shift-N, has no effect. If the workbook containing the macro is open, you can run the macro while any workbook is active, which means we save the macro in a file, name, for example, name and time, and we open another file, book 1 or book 2 or whatever. We can execute the macro stored in name and time file in another workbook. The macro is not pro quality code, which means it will override existing text with no warning, and its effects cannot be undone. Before we started recording the macro, we have assigned a shortcut key. This is just one of several ways to execute the macro. You can create this macro manually rather than record it. To do that, you need a good understanding of VBA. You can store this macro in your personal macro workbook. If you do that, the macro is available automatically whenever you start Excel. I hope this lesson helps you to realize that Excel programming is something interesting and something you can do. Keep learning. In the subsequent lessons, we'll answer any questions you have, and you will soon understand exactly what you did in this lesson. Next lesson, we are going to discuss more about the VBE environment.